Everyone, I'm Matthew Rose, and I'm here with Shalori Jones, Josh Agee, and Brandon Harrison. We're here at this year's 2016 CROI conference having a discussion on minority health. So, what? Minority health, it's a huge topic. I guess let's start with what do you think is the most important thing, or what comes to mind when you think about minority health? Just quick responses.
Health disparities.
Health disparities, that's a good one. Josh?
Minority health is, to me, it's almost like bad health. When I think about minorities, I think about I automatically think about bad things, and I look at the healthcare system in Jackson, Mississippi, where I'm from, and compared to everyone else, we're not getting the same health care. We're not used to getting that health care. Oftentimes when people come and get tested, that's the closest to a healthcare system that they get to. So when I think about minority health, I think about bad healthcare.
Sure.
Similar to both of these gentlemen, I think about health disparities. I think about a little bit about gender bias when it comes down to research, access to funding, and things like that. But also stigma. It's a huge issue. A lot of my work is in ministry, so I think about the connection between health, wellness, as well as ministry and how that shows up in our community.
I actually think you open an important kind of discussion. Where do you think this kind of mistrust for the healthcare system comes? Why are minorities always thinking disparities and bad? I mean, it's the first place all your minds kind of went. So where do you think that comes from? And then where do you think we might go to kind of help move past that? Because I always like to say, don't give me your problems without bringing me some solutions.
Yeah, not my monkey, not my circus. Huh?
Yep.
Yeah. So what I think specifically is, I think back to my grandmother. My grandmother's always, or my grandfather as well, is always saying the same thing about doctors. You know, they're quacks, don't trust them, so on and so forth, right? But that goes back to years and years of research that was done on our people, right? I think about studies with Johns Hopkins. I think about HeLa cells that have had so much research that have come out of that, but that family has not benefited from it, which has created a sense of distrust by our families historically, and that's passed on generation to generation. But how do we in our generation move forward from that and enlighten those that are in our current generation and after us that is not necessarily the case? But I think us showing up as a people and being able to communicate within our communities can help kind of bridge the gap.
I'm going to jump and go Brandon.
To me.
Keep them on your toes.
So, I think one of the most concrete examples, in my lifetime that I can, and people I think a little bit younger than me can refer back is Tuskegee. And so, that's one of the biggest things that we can look at for me, at why we kind of have that distrust in the medical system. But then I also look at how many black providers there are that I've providers I've had personally, and I know that I probably can count one or two providers that have been black. And as a male, looking at black providers, how many black providers have been a black male? And so we often go to things that we're familiar with, we trust, and so I think that a lot of the doctors that in the areas that I've lived in and that we've lived in are white, and sometimes it's also a disconnect there because they may not understand that, I'm coming to get medical advice, but my grandmother may just say drink apple cider vinegar because that'll work for everything. And so I don't have a doctor that understands that cultural background at why I may not want to immediately start high blood pressure because grandmother managed her high blood pressure with apple cider vinegar or things like that. And so I think that we really need to build a better infrastructure for black providers and black people to be in the medical field so that we have more, we have those things that we can relate to.
Thanks. Josh?
I definitely agree with Brandon and Shalori. Personally, I ask my friends, I love to talk about PrEP, so I'm going to bring PrEP into this. Okay, so I ask my friends to get on PrEP, and I tell them that they should be on PrEP and how effective it is. But so many of my friends don't trust it because of, like he said, Tuskegee, and like Shalori said, my friends, they ask me, will your body develop some kind of resistance? Are you sure the government isn't giving this to you to make you have HIV? They don't trust the system, and until we can trust the system, we're not going to have these medical advances that our counterparts have.
Right, and just to add on to trauma, there's so much trauma that we there's so much trauma that we've had, and then as it progresses on, like the numbers that came out this week, 1 in 2 gay men will contract HIV in their lifetime. Like that's another traumatic thing that happened to us with or without people recognizing. Like that's a very, like I literally woke up in the middle of the night thinking about it last night. And so I think that like we have to be very mindful at how like data and things like this are released, because I think that it's a very traumatic thing. And now I think even with the advances in like PrEP and things like that, we still have people that are like, damn, this is like condoms didn't work, like, and now I'm literally 1 in 2. Like I can sit in a room and just count 1 in 2, and like it could be me, it could definitely be, or even for women, so like 1 in 48, they can sit in a room and say, black women specifically, can sit in a room and say, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 48, like 1. So I think that we need to, I don't know, we need to be mindful, and I think that we really need to think about the messaging that goes out with data like that, because now I just hope that it doesn't deter people from the idea that there are preventative methods for preventing HIV with these new numbers.
Yeah. So, one thing that kind of happens a lot with minority health, especially with health for black folks, is that we see disparity and we end up at the bottom of everything. You can go to almost every major health indicator and the group getting the least is black folks. So, and that can be really depressing and can be really traumatic, as Brandon was saying. So what are things that you like to think about that give you hope? What makes you excited? What makes you get out of the bed and continue to do work to make kind of things better, or think that things might get better?
For me, I think the networks and coalitions that we're building within our communities to deal with these issues are helpful. Specifically with me, I am the chair of our Faith and Spirituality Committee for Black Treatment Advocates Network, and it's cool to me that we get to go into church communities and talk about holistic health, or we get to, hold town halls about holistic health and wellness, everything from your diabetes to your HIV, or just everything overall, and that is the most encouraging, is that we can build awareness within our communities and kind of take a little bit of the edge off of their experience, or shed some light for those of all generations. So for me, that's what gives me hope.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to attend AHU, African American HIV University Science and Treatment College, and it taught me a lot. And in AHU, we had to present when we went back to our communities. When I was able to present the information that I learned to my community, they were very, very excited, and they wanted to know more, and that excited me to learn more and go to conferences like this, like CROI. Since I've been at CROI, I've learned about broadly neutralizing antibodies, so many advances in HIV care and HIV prevention, and I think that's awesome. And as Brandon mentioned, the 1 and 2, that's motivated me more than anything. So I'm ready to go back home. I'm ready to teach people more about these prevention strategies, and to tell them that PrEP works, and we should be using PrEP, and we should be open to these other ideas of research.
I think one of the biggest motivators for me, and it only happened once. I've been a big PrEP cheerleader since the beginning. And so I like would post things, and I would tell my mom I'm working in this PrEP work, and I'm doing this related to PrEP. And one day she was at lunch, and I did a video a few years ago. I did a video. She showed someone the video. They had a conversation about PrEP, and she knew how to explain PrEP. No, she knew how to explain PrEP, but she had questions about PEP. So she called me in the middle of our lunch period, and she's like, PrEP is the pill, kind of like birth control. You take it to prevent HIV, but PEP, that's the one, and I'm like, that's the one you take after you've been exposed. And so when I think about people who are able to take something small, and we've never had a full conversation about PrEP. She went and did this research herself. But for someone to take just the smallest bits that you give them, and they're able to research it, and they're able to take that information and share it with someone else, it really keeps me motivated. Naturally, I love to be a trainer and do presentations, and so if I can just get that information to someone who's able to facilitate that that information to someone else, it's really empowering and exciting for me.
if I can share, I want to piggyback off of both of these gentlemen, is that my partner's a pastor. And what has enlightened me recently is that he's starting to ask more questions about PrEP specifically. And he's been to trainings, he's been to meetings, and he's kind of been on the fence with a lot of the work that I do. But it was encouraging that, he came home one day and was like, hey, I saw this particular advertisement on the bus and started asking questions about it. And it was very positive, which means that if he is open to it, that congregation could also be open to it. We're seeing that information from leadership. So it just shows the movement, like once there's exposure or awareness built within even the church communities, that we can start to move forward.
I guess that's a good segue, kind of my next surprise question. How is it looking in your communities? Are people so focused on kind of these numbers and these disparities? Do people even really talk about health? Or are you seeing a change where people who before weren't having the discussion are open to at least talking about things like PrEP? I know a lot of folks that say that it's a conversation starter for them to talk about people's health and people going to the doctor. And providers, are y'all seeing that? Or is this some like weird Matt reads too many articles?
I think within my immediate community, at least like my circle of friends, like within at least once a month, I get a text about something related. 1 week, I had 5 texts in 1 week about like, hi, I'm trying to access PrEP, and they're like in various cities across the country. And then they may have encountered copays, they may have encountered their provider not knowing what PrEP was. But fortunately enough for me, I live in New York where PrEP uptake is ridiculously high. The governor has declared ending AIDS by 2020 with an entire blueprint and put some infrastructure behind ending AIDS in New York. And I think that with the Department of Health in New York and advertising, I think that they're putting HIV, like HIV is still in the forefront. But I think once someone engages into, so if it's PrEP, that's their entryway into the medical system, or if it's just an HIV test and with the Affordable Care Act and things like that in place, so you get there, you realize you just came for an HIV test, but you have a tickle in the back of your throat. There's insurance navigators throughout most of the clinics in New York, and so it becomes a gateway to the healthcare system, whether or not you expected it to be that way. And I think that's the direction we have to move to end health disparities in our communities.
Well, he's from New York. I'm from Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, and unfortunately, it's very, very different. I recently started working as the PrEP coordinator in the clinic in Jackson, Mississippi, and we're seeing a gradual increase in PrEP uptake. It takes a lot of work. Many people don't know about Gilead. They don't know that if they don't have insurance, they don't have to pay for it. They don't know that they do have insurance, that we offer the copay assistance programs. But I'm really proud that I know so much information that I learned at AHU that really caused me to get this particular position that I have, and I can disseminate this information to these people. Jackson is really, really small, so people know what you're doing. So a lot of people know that I work with PrEP now, so they'll call me. They're asking me about PrEP when they can set an appointment, and how much it costs and the side effects and things like that. So it's very exciting. Our numbers are slowly increasing. So I think it's improving, and hopefully we see a dramatic increase in PrEP uptake and in healthcare in general.
I want to focus on something that CROI had brought up earlier about gender imbalance. Are you all seeing in your cities balance in kind of how PrEP is getting access and who's at meetings to talk about PrEP? And I think about this because, while we see the 1 in 2 number in Black gay men that was recently released, what we don't talk about really is that at the last National HIV Prevention Conference, we saw that HIV incidents were going down in women, and were going down even in Black women over the last 8 years. So are we seeing Black women getting the tools they need, like PrEP, to end the epidemic for them? Or are they kind of getting overshadowed by this kind of, this big discussion of Black gay men? And by all means, it is definitely a state of emergency. But as we know as Black people, that we tend to live in Black communities, and as part of Black culture, we don't separate ourselves. I mean, for God's sakes, every Black gay man, well, maybe not every, loves themselves a Black woman at some point in their life. So what are you seeing in terms of seeing sisters at the table and being there for your sisters? And we're gonna start with Shalori being the sister on our
Oh my
panel.
gosh. Well, I'm usually the only sister at the table or the panel or the group or the coalition as is. But when I'm in my group of sisters, right, when we have conversations, it is very loving and it is very open-minded as far as taking charge of your own health. And they do ask a lot of questions, which is great. But even in the circles where I am the only woman, it does require a lot of me and maybe the one other sister that's there to kind of push our agenda to the forefront of those conversations or to the projects that we're moving forward, because 1 in 48 is drastically different than 1 in 2. So we do tend to lean toward the 1 in 2, or even looking at, you know, what's happening to our trans sisters and figuring out what's going on with that work as well. So what's common as Black women is we put ourselves last and everyone else before us, and it does even happen in the work.
I think that what's happened, and I heard a recent talk that alluded to this or supported this idea, is that for so long, because gay men have the highest, they're most affected by HIV, I think that it often becomes a gay men against Black women, or Black gay men against Black women when it comes to prevention. And I think that, and it's not, I don't think that anyone intentionally does it, but I think that it's just the way that the cards fall. And I think that I've worked on like social networking strategies before, and I think that Black women have allowed, as you said, there's always a Black woman in a gay male's life. And I think that they have a lot of power and influence. And I think that if Black women were if they were more informed around PrEP, or if they were more informed around a lot of like issues that are specifically regarding Black gay men, that they could use their influence to change prevention and include like Black gay, or be in supportive of Black gay men while still like finding their place in prevention. And I just want to answer like the question around PrEP in our community in New York specifically. I recently had a Women in PrEP town hall where there were young women using PrEP. There was a person who was using it for conception. There was someone who was just using it because their partner was positive, and then there was someone who was in sex exchange. And so there were various levels at why people had chose PrEP, but I think that it's very hard to get women to realize that PrEP is even for them, because we have marketed it so much for Black gay men. So I think we definitely need to change the marketing and find a way to include Black women more.
I'll add that we did, I think, 1 or 2 town halls last year, 2 specifically, one with a pharmaceutical company and then one separately from that, specifically for Black women in PrEP, and they were shocked and surprised. So Brandon's right, if bringing that awareness would be helpful,
Josh, tell me about the South. What do you see?
Well, when I first started working at the clinic, there weren't very many women on PrEP, but now we're getting the nurses to mention it to the women more. So we're actually starting to get more women on PrEP. There's been a couple of women who have come in as sex workers, and we're like, okay, well, you're a sex worker, you definitely be on PrEP. It works. PrEP works for women. So, like I said, just as in the MSM population, we're seeing a gradual increase in PrEP uptake among women as well.
So we'll go with final thoughts. You've been at this conference now for 4 days. You have heard a whole lot of science. There's a whole lot of potential things to take back to your community. There's a whole bunch you've learned. What excites you? What is most interesting to you? And what is the thing that kind of is the brightest kind of shining beacon of what you're taking back to your community, and you really hope that they learn and that you get to teach them?
I think for me it's the advances in PrEP and the promises of different types of PrEP. We have to think about our populations, and a lot of our people may not have stable homes. They may have confidentiality issues. There's a number of issues that could keep a person from taking a daily pill. And so the promises of PrEP, and knowing that there's going to be other methods of PrEP coming down the pipeline that could totally affect how some young gay person or some sex worker or some woman who is in a relationship takes PrEP. And so I just think that it's really exciting, and I just want to share those slides and be able to kind of give some light at the end of the tunnel that while a pill a day may not work for you, there's other forms of PrEP?
I feel like I'm working really, really hard as far as prevention and treatment in my community. But seeing those numbers released a few days ago by the CDC, it's motivated me to work even harder because it makes me really sad that it's so many prevention strategies out there and people aren't using them. And at first, I was afraid of being, judged by my peers, by my family members. But since seeing these numbers, I'm like, forget that. I'm going to do what I need to do to help save my community the best way possible. And like Brendan said, I'm really excited about the new PrEP prevention strategies because a pill doesn't work for everyone. We need every tool that we possibly can get in that toolbox of prevention.
Very similar to the gentleman, the different forms of PrEP, specifically for me, the ring. As I used to do a lot of work in birth control, so I understand how a pill does not work for everybody in any shape, form, or fashion. So I'm really excited about bringing that back to BTNLA and being able to share that with them.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's been a lovely conversation, and thanks for being here for the conference. And I look forward to the great work that all three of you do next.
Thanks.
Thank you.